All right, so let's talk. So I wanted to talk about something. Let's get into PMU a little bit, and something that I came across, and I found it really interesting, and I wanted to talk about it today. I think I showed it to you guys, or you showed it to me. I'm not really sure, but I was on Instagram. Well, the post I saw was on Instagram, and it was a machine, but it had this plastic gadget around it down by the needles, and I think they called it a depth guard. And it was on the machine. It was this, like I said, this plastic gadget. I don't know any other word. I'm going to call it a gadget that you attach to your machine down by where your needles are, and they called it a depth guard. So supposedly it prevents you or anybody from going too deep. It controls needle depth for you. And so someone was asking me, someone kind of asked me, like, what did I think about it? I think it was one of the artists here, like what did I think about it? And I'm personally not for it. I'm just not really for it. I don't even really like that those things like come in the industry and they're offered like in our industry. I'm just not for it at all. And some of you may disagree with me, and that's okay. We still love and respect each other. I still love you, and I know you still love me. Lots of things can be learned from someone you disagree with. I think we learn much more from people who think and do things differently than us, rather than from people that think and do things the same way that we do. And with this podcast, I think that's what this podcast is all about. That's why I love doing this podcast. It's this podcast is building a community, and the reason it's building community, I think, is because we are openly discussing topics, and some of the topics we talk about on here are open to debate, subject to debate, and subject to opinion. Like just about everything in our industry is subject to opinion, and lots of people have lots of different opinions. And I like that we can openly discuss topics on here, even the controversial topics, and discuss them in a respectful way that doesn't offend anybody if you feel differently, if you disagree with me. The last thing I want to do, with this podcast is upset and offend people and make anyone feel that their ideas or their thoughts about a particular technique, product, needle is wrong or bad or not the right way. My way or my thoughts aren't the right way. Never proclaim. It's just my way. And I think a conversation like this, it provokes thought. And I think that's my main mission with this podcast, is to create community and provoke thought, get people thinking, strategically and critically thinking about everything in PMU and your personal lives, because sometimes we go into finances and law of attraction and positive thought and things like that. So let me tell you this depth guard on a machine, my reasons for not digging it. Probably first and foremost, the reason like it's just not for me is, when we're all young, right? We learn to ride a bike. Did you learn to ride a bike, Willow, first, or did you get on? Or it was a skateboard, the first thing you got on that had wheels? It was a bike. Well, we all learned to ride a bike. So let me ask you guys this. When your parents or whoever taught you how to ride a bike, did it have training wheels, or it did?
Yeah, it did.
You Olivia, had training wheels. Well, not my dad. My first bike did not have training wheels. Yeah, that man, my dad, my hero, put me on two wheels. My very first time getting on a bike. He just put me on two wheels. He didn't put me on training wheels. And I don't really, I think I was 4 or 5 or 6. I can't remember. So I don't have vivid memory of it, but I do have some vague, cloudy memory of it. And I do know that of course I fell off many times. And my dad told me that it took about 3 days of trying, but he said he was like but you were so determined, and you just kept getting on it. And he's like, it was about 3 days where you were really super steady and you're, going around the block and you're doing fantastic. So maybe it's in my DNA that, because that's kind of how I look at this depth guard, as kind of training wheels for our machines. And so again, just going back to childhood and the way my dad raised me, it just could be my DNA and the way I'm wired. I personally, in my PMU career, way back when I was learning, the very first time I picked up a machine, I would not want to have been taught with a depth guard or some sort of safety mechanism with depth on my machine. I would not want to have been taught that way. I'm the type of person, I want to be taught like the proper way right from the get-go. And I'm not saying a depth guard is not the proper way. So pardon that term. I guess a depth guard, if you use a depth guard, that's a step that you're taking, but then there's this another whole step that you've got to get to, and that's tattooing without a depth guard. Kind of like riding a bike. Like when you first get on a bike, step one for most people are the training wheels, right? To kind of stable you. But then your whole goal is to get to the next step, drop the training wheels and be on 2 wheels. So I don't want that first step. I'm like that just about in everything I do. I want to, like, the ultimate goal. That's what I want. I want to take the steps needed to reach that ultimate goal right from the beginning. I don't want to take beginner steps if I don't have to. Some things, of course, there's no other way around it. You have to take beginner steps. But we don't have to use a depth guard. I mean, this is the first time I've seen this in our industry. So, we've been learning depth without depth guards all these years. I have never taught any one of our Girlz and Gardists or any one of my classroom students that way. And the other, and I'll point out that I've never even I don't even retract the needle, right, to keep them from going too deep. I've never been that trainer that retracts the needle so they cannot go too deep. I've always been the type of trainer and mentor that floats that needle out, anywhere from 2 to 4 millimeters, proper depth. So my apprentice or that student is learning depth right from the get-go. And I'm there. I'm there keeping them out of trouble and watching and guiding. But yeah, I just think I think maybe it might put artists at a disadvantage. I'm wondering if artists would get too comfortable with a depth guard. I'm wondering if it would take them too long to get off a depth guard. And right. Yeah. And the other thing is, as we're working on our procedures, whether it's brows, eyeliner, or, now we're doing, tiny tats, we're doing areolas, and on areolas, there's, scar work, if you use, there's different, thicknesses to the skin. So, which requires a variance of hand pressure, as we move across the area. So for instance, in a brow, you might need a little less hand pressure in the tail area and maybe a little more hand pressure in the bulb. So different areas of the brow, depending on the thickness or thinness of the skin, can require more hand pressure. And of course, our hand pressure controls depth. So if you have a depth guard, adjusting your depth as you move across a procedure is completely restricted. So, for those reasons, I just don't really dig the depth guards. I think if you chose to be a PMU artist, you chose a highly specialized service, a highly specialized craft that you are going to offer to the public. And that requires super specialized knowledge, training, and skill to be good at PMU. You have to obtain that knowledge, skill, and mastery to reach a high level of success. And we all want to reach a high level success. I don't think any of us got into this industry with the intention of reaching a low level of success or mediocre level of success. I think all of us that got into this industry have the intention to reach a high level of success and to be as good as we possibly can be. And a piece of that puzzle, a big, huge piece of it, is depth, learning depth. And depth, it's one of the most important things you have to learn right from the start to get going on the right track and to execute really beautiful procedures. We all know that depth really affects the performance of our pigments, and of course, going too deep can even affect the skin. So depth is really, really important. I understand why someone would think of creating a product like this, to help with that learning process, to help prevent someone from going too deep. But this is where I want to provoke your thought. This is what I think about. If you put someone on a depth guard, so they don't even have to learn vibration, they don't have to learn the feel of depth, they don't have to learn what it feels like to be on the tip of your needles versus, a little too deep, a little too shallow versus, right in that sweet spot. And we learn all that by feel, by vibration of, the vibration we feel in our stretch hand, the vibration we feel in the hand holding the machine. It's just, you just develop that feel for depth. So if someone is put on a machine with a depth guard, they can disregard all that. They don't have to pay attention to all that. And would they? Would they pay attention to any of that? If you don't have a depth guard, you have to be in tune with that. You have to really pay attention to, the vibration, the sound of your machine, because your sound changes. I mean, the sound of your machine changes. Whether you're too shallow, you're too deep, or you're just right, vibration will change, and the sound of your machine will change. And so when you're learning depth, you're super in tune to that. You're listening, you're feeling, and you're really, really honed in and obsessed trying to gauge your depth and get it just right. And you want to get to a point where you just know depth. The minute you put that needle on skin and you get going, you are perfect depth. You know when to lift, release a little bit, when to add a little more pressure. It's just so natural. And what I'm wondering is, if someone starts out on a depth guard, they ignore all that because they don't really have to pay attention because they got a depth guard preventing them from going too deep, preventing them from having to pay attention to those senses, the sense of feel, the sense of sound, right? The sense of intuition. And at some point, that depth guard needs to come off. At some point, the depth guard needs to come off. And when it comes off, are they going to know proper depth by feel, by sound, by intuition? Probably not. That's what I was thinking about. So I don't know how the depth guard could benefit a newbie. I think it might. I think it might slow down their progress. Their progress. I don't no, I don't think it's really that beneficial for a newbie, and it will slow down their progress. It restricts them. And yeah, so that's just kind of my 2 cents on it. It'd be interesting to hear what other people think about it. Some of you, might think I'm, completely wrong, and you like the idea of a depth guard. I can tell you that a depth guard, I don't think anybody would attempt to even market that in the body tattoo industry. To be really honest with you, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so. I just, the body tattoo industry, they're pretty hardcore when it comes to, apprenticing, skill, knowledge, and not using these gadgets to to cut corners and whatnot. But in the PMU industry, these sort of things do show up in our industry. They do show up for sale, and some of them are good. So some of these products to assist us with our procedures that are manufactured and show up are really, really good. And then some of them, I don't really dig them. I don't necessarily think that they're good for newbies. There's also like an SMP machine that we saw, correct? Yeah. That which was really interesting watching how it works. And I have not had the chance to ask any of my SMP friends like Chris or Stevie G, how they feel about it. But we had Chris out here on a podcast, and Stevie G I've known for, 10 years, and they're both just really super good artists. And I'm wondering how they would feel about that. So this SMP machine, it moves for you. You just hold the machine so it doesn't fall down. You just hold it, and it's programmed somehow to just put it just puts the dots in for you. It moves it's programmed to move by itself. It moves a certain amount of space and puts a dot, and then moves and puts a dot, like a sweeping motion. Yeah. Almost like a whip shade. Yeah. It was not that it wasn't super cool to watch. We watched that video, Willow. We were like, oh my gosh, but I don't know. I think these types of gadgets remove the artistry from what we do. They come in and they remove the artistry from what we do. And like I said, if we are in this industry, if you chose to be a PMU artist or an SMP artist, you chose to be an artist. You chose to be an artist. And it's a little bit of a pride thing for me too. I think I'm so proud to be a PMU artist. And I just want to learn every inch of it, master every bit of it that I possibly can. I want to soak up as much as I can. I want to be the best I can be. And I want to be able to do it with my own hands, and knowing depth and understanding color theory and skin. And I think most of us are like that. But then, of course, there's always the people that want to they don't want to take the time to invest in themselves and learn the ins and outs of PMU, which is comprised of many different topics, many different things. There's a massive list of things that PMU artists have to learn and get really good at to be able to execute really, really well. And it can be overwhelming and daunting sometimes. I get it, especially if you're stuck on a subject, if you're having a hard time with depth, or if you're having a hard time with color theory, then I can totally understand how you can feel defeated. You can feel defeated. And maybe that's what leads some people to, cut corners and try to find something that will take the learning away, where they don't really necessarily have to learn it. But like I said, just not really my thing. I don't know. Okay. So that's it. And I have not met anybody that used a depth guard yet. I haven't. So that's something I would like to do. I really would like to talk to somebody that's used depth guarding and see how it works, and because I might have a total change of opinion. I don't know. Maybe I'm forming my opinion a little too early, since I haven't put one on one of my machines, and I haven't personally talked to anybody who's using one. But just looking at it, knowing why it's out there and being offered, and I did form an opinion, and that's it. I just gave it to you. But like I said, that's just me.